Is it recording? Yeah? Okay, great. So, how did you end up being a rabbi here in Western Mass? How'd you get here?
So actually, I moved here 10 years ago.
Has it been 10 years already?
It has.
Wow.
In 2008, the synagogue I was working at in Kansas City was looking to reorganize themselves. And I was the number 2 rabbi, and it was clear that the best thing for me to do was to move on. So in my job search, actually, Beth El was particularly attractive to me because I really was excited about the challenge of helping Beth El and B'nai Jacob merge in a way that would honor both communities. I thought that was an interesting rabbinic challenge. And I wanted to move I was really impressed with the work that the Grinspoon Foundation had done. And I imagined that some of the work that they had done would have left a mark on the community here. So I looked at a bunch of different jobs, but truthfully, this one particularly spoke out to me because of the merger and because of the Grinspoon Foundation.
Interesting. So what was it from the Grinspoon Foundation that was
At
attractive?
the time, the Grinspoon Foundation was really focused on local work. They were doing significant family education grants and significant teen education, and they were much more of a local foundation. In the last 10 years, actually, the Grinspoon Foundation has become much more national and international and focusing mostly on camps and PJ Library and legacy. But at the time, they were more focused. I mean, the foundation's plenty philanthropic locally still, but it's a different kind of organization now than it was. And but at the time, I thought, wow, to be in a synagogue where there's a funder who's interested in the local community in that kind of way made Springfield really attractive.
Right. Oh, okay. So can you talk about what makes Jewish congregations and communities in this region unique relative to other Jewish communities that you know?
So the uniqueness is not 100% a positive.
I'm sure.
The demographics in New England, I think, are worse than the demographics in the South or the Midwest because the economy's bad.
Oh.
Right? So young families are not moving in here.
Right.
In the way that, like, I just happened to take a vacation in Greenville, South Carolina at the beginning of the summer. And the infrastructure of the city and the amount that is being put into making Greenville a vibrant community, it's much smaller than here, but there's a much larger tax base because of the business that's there. So that's a challenge that this community has. On the other hand, this community has a history that is really quite extraordinary. So there's challenges of demographics. And in general, 2018 is hard to be liberal congregations. And on the other hand, Beth El is 105 years old and has a long history that sort of distinguishes it. And so it's kind of this interesting mix of opportunities and challenges.
Yeah, I would think so, because I think there's a lot of small congregations, like kind of scattered, especially in Western Mass. And I don't know how any of them are really staying afloat. Some of them are just like there for the summer, like out in Pittsfield.
And the truth of the matter is there's not a strong rabbinic association of Western Mass. There's a rabbinic association of Massachusetts, but not Western Mass. So I don't even necessarily know all of my colleagues or know the kind of work that they do. I know some. I know the ones that are sort of local, like Northampton, Amherst, Hartford, but I really don't know those littler congregations in the Berkshires, for example, and I don't know who's running them.
Right.
So their world is completely different than ours because they are a vacation summer world, and we're much more, I think, of a 24 or 12 months a year.
12 months a year, because I know in the Berkshires they get a lot of people from New York.
Right. And in the Berkshires is alive in the summer in a way that's different than here. Totally.
So, well, they also have like Jacob's Pillow and a lot of cultural things.
And so I know the
Yeah.
congregations really engage the communities differently than here because it's like I have a friend who's a rabbi in the Hamptons. So her busy season starts in May and ends in October.
Oh, wow.
Okay, it's a different It's a different rhythm. So our rhythm isn't like the Berkshire's rhythm. but we share certain, and I think actually we share certain things in common, but our demographics are not like the Berkshire demographics either.
Right, right. Yeah, we don't get a huge influx in the summer.
No, and I think the demographics, like the finances of the Berkshires, is probably in better shape than here.
Yeah.
Here, things are definitely challenging.
Yeah.
No question.
What do you think would do to be able to kind of turn that around?
So I know the locals are excited about the casino.
I'm not one of them.
I don't know that the casino is going to turn the economy around.
Yeah.
I have more faith in Eric Lester's notion of the high-speed rail.
Yeah.
That, I think, is a possibility. And I think also people doing a lot of telecommuting is another way in which this place becomes very attractive because we're so close to Boston and New York, and yet our housing costs are so much more reasonable.
Yeah.
It seems to me those are the ways that the demographics are going to turn themselves around. Or if some philanthropist realizes that investing business-wise in this community is a way to rejuvenate it.
Mm-hmm.
That's another possibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope they do the high-speed rail because we moved out here about 32 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still waiting for that high-speed rail that we were told was in the making when we moved out here.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it had been in the discussion for that long.
Oh, yeah. I have a feeling probably longer.
Oh. It's interesting. They're about to open a high-speed rail between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
Oh.
Which will make it a 30-minute commute.
Oh, fabulous.
Right.
Yeah, because now when I go from where my daughter lives to Jerusalem to see somebody, it's like 3 hours.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, because it's an hour to get to the bus station, then another hour to get from the Tel Aviv bus station to Jerusalem bus station, then another hour to get from there to where.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Mm.
Yeah. 6 hours for a couple-hour visit.
Right.
Okay. So, what are your greatest challenges and rewards of serving Western Mass communities?
So the demographics are the biggest challenge. There's no question about it. And again, that's like it's particularly hard here, but it's not unique to here. They're just hard times to do 40 funerals in a year. It's hard.
Oh.
And the other part, and it's funny because people think about this as the blessing of Western Mass, but as one who's trying to organize and mobilize a sense of community. The fact that we're an hour and a half from Boston and 2.5 hours from New York and 2 hours from the Cape and an hour from the Berkshires actually makes it very hard to infuse a sense of community because people are gone so much. Mm-hmm. So we're an older community, so people aren't here to take care of their children. Right. And so everybody's coming and going a lot. And that coming and going, so just as an example, let's say we want to schedule a big event. Mm-hmm. Well, if we do it over the summer, people are going to the Cape. They're going to the Berkshires. If we do it in the winter, people often go away. They're snowbirds.
Right.
Or they go to New York for the weekend. I mean, it's hard to know what our season is, actually.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if we were in Boca Raton, we know our season. Our season would be from November to March or November to April.
Yeah, yeah.
So that to me is a real challenge. And no matter what weekend I pick, there's a good chance that somebody will be going to spend time with their children in New York, or their children in Boston, or their children in Westchester, or their children in New Haven. And I'm thrilled that people are so close to their children. I mean, it's really lovely.
That is nice.
But it makes it harder.
Yeah.
And I actually think, to me, the challenging demographics coupled with the significant geographic desirability is actually hard. So when I had a congregation in Lansing, Michigan, where do you go? Right.
It was Lansing, Michigan, or nothing, probably.
Right. I mean, the only way to go away would be to fly or drive 4 hours to Chicago. So people didn't go away as much. And it's not because it was less affluent or it was a younger congregation. It was actually people in the Midwest don't have this notion of going away as much as here, where I see it myself. Like, next week I have a day and a half, and I'm thinking, maybe I'll run to New York. I haven't been to the theater. I wouldn't run to New York if I were in Lansing, or I would just stay put.
Yeah.
So.
That's interesting. So it's 4 hours one way from Lansing to Chicago?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it would make it an 8-hour trip.
Yeah, it's not a day trip.
Yeah.
Under any circumstance. And it's not even really, I've done it in 2 days, gone, but it's not ideal.
Right. So do you think it might be because the New England states are really small? I mean, when you look at the Midwestern states, they're much larger.
Well, they're small, but also like really desirable places are not so far. It's not a big deal to go to Cape. It's not a big deal to go to Newport, Rhode Island. It's not a big deal to go to Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard. I mean, those are all so easy to do.
Yeah.
It takes a small, quiet town, and people say, I love it here. It's affordable housing, but I can go away whenever I want. And that's the challenge.
Yeah. So what are the rewards?
So I wasn't here before I came, obviously. I'm told that the conservative community has a completely different feel to it. Not to say that what was here before me wasn't very good, because I actually have a lot of admiration for my predecessor, Rabbi Schwartz, and the work he did. But I'm told that there's sort of this Hamish, comfortable feeling that has swept over the community that is probably more a result of like the times have changed. And being in a small community, you can make a difference and help the community to reimagine itself much more easily than you can if you're in a large community. So I've been told that since I came, the congregations collaborate more, that the relationship with the JCC is better than ever. So in a communal way, to have a hand in shaping a reimagining of communal Jewish life is a fantastic feeling. Couple that with, I get to really, I hope, make people's lives easier, whether I'm officiating at a life cycle event. I think that's largely it. Or, people, it's nice to see people who truly feel inspired from the teaching or from the role modeling of involvement and engagement in worship. That's very rewarding, really rewarding. That feels really good.
Yeah. So do you see people actually starting to come more to shul, or?
Yes and no. I mean, we have a different group of people that came now that come now than that came 10 years ago. And you see, I can think of any one of a number of people who are trying on more rituals and are embracing more. I mean, you come more than you came 10 years ago, but 10 years ago I think you went up to Northampton more.
Yeah, I still go up to Northampton.
But it feels to me like you're around Bethel more.
Well, I decided to come to the Minyan.
Right.
Yeah.
So
the afternoon one.
Right. So I feel it and that's an example where it's not that Bethel changed you Jewishly, but it became a place that you were more comfortable with than you imagined 10 years ago, right? And that feels good to know that there are people who are comfortable with the place. Not every person who's involved do I need to have changed, or do we need to have changed their life as much as just made a space that is comfortable or accessible or desirable. So I see that a lot, and that feels good. And whether it's the daily minyan, or whether it's somebody wanting to serve at the soup kitchen, or whether it's someone coming to the morning minyan, or there are people who never used to be involved with the temple who are now really active. Yeah. I'll take any of that.
Right. That's good. Well, for me, I mean, it was saying Kaddish, because that was the only one that was available, unless I went to the Orthodox. And both times that I had to do it, I wanted to stay connected with the minyan, because I felt, well, if it was here for me, I should be here for someone else.
Right. And I feel like that's one of the great things that we provide that isn't a given anywhere else in Western Mass. Right? Where else is there a non-Orthodox minyan that meets pretty consistently? We certainly have our off days. Yeah. But in the morning and the evening, they don't have it up in the Upper Valley.
No, they don't. And once a week. Once a
Okay,
week, yeah.
like once a week is like it's not daily.
No, it's not. Yeah.
And
Right,
so that's one of the ways in which I'm really proud of the way that we can be available, and that regardless of how observant people are, they take advantage of it, and that's nice to see.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's very nice to see.
Oh, nice. Good. Okay, time for glasses on this time. Okay, so how would you characterize your relationship with local clergy of other faiths?
No, I think I have a good relationship with the local clergy in Longmeadow and East Longmeadow. I have not done as much with the Springfield clergy, but the clergy here in our community has been really terrific, and we've done some nice things together, and it's been very positive.
That's cool. What kind of things have you done?
So, for example, last year we brought in this organization called Roots, which is it's called Shorashim in Hebrew, and it is a settler who is working hard with Palestinians to try and create a dialogue about the administered territories. When I reached out to my Christian clergy and said we were having it, they offered to host it, which made the location a more neutral place, and they gave us $1,000 towards it.
Wow.
Right.
That's nice.
That was great. Yeah. We're hoping to teach a class in the fall on challenging texts from a Jewish and or Christian perspective.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, that'll be, I think we said Tuesday or Wednesday night, I can't remember. But so I feel really good about those efforts.
And that would be done with non-Jewish clergy?
Yeah, non-Jewish and Jewish clergy working together.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it could be a great class.
Interesting.
I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. Sounds cool. Okay. So the faiths represented, though, in East Longmeadow and Longmeadow are they all Catholic or?
No, they're Christian, they're Protestant and Catholic.
Okay.
But there's not, that I know of, there's not a mosque in either community.
Right.
And there's not much representation from Eastern religions. At least not as much as I know.
Right. Is there a mosque in Springfield? I thought there was.
There is a mosque in Springfield.
Yeah. But because I know if we were in touch with the Muslim community, that would be very, very different.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Rabbi Jacobson has really involved herself with the Muslim community.
Oh, really?
She definitely has. And so that's sort of given me a little space to say, okay, as long as the community's the Jewish community is being represented,
right,
I'm good.
Right. Did you have any feelings like one way or another to go with the Christians versus the Muslims versus some other group?
So back in Kansas City, I did a lot of work with the Christian community, with the liberal Christian community, with the evangelical Christian community. Here, initially, I didn't do any of that because I really had to focus on my congregation. And now that I've started to branch out, I have tended to focus on the Jewish community. It's probably been a little bit of a mistake. It's a little challenging because sometimes when you reach out to the Muslim community, it becomes more political.
Yeah.
And that's just a more challenging conversation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. So how would you describe your congregation Jewishly? What is the level of observance?
There's a handful of people who are really knowledgeable and who are really observant and who are sort of the stalwarts of the congregation. Like every other conservative congregation in the country, and I'm going to say that again, like every other conservative congregation in the country, there are lots of people who don't know too much, who don't do too much, but somehow want to be a member of a conservative congregation because they want to be more traditional than the Reform, or our school meets at the right time, or they like our education. I mean, like, people don't pick for ideological reasons. They pick for a bunch of sociological reasons. We don't have as many people actively engaged in learning as I would like, but that statistic will be replicated in any congregation I go to, I think. It's just part of the challenges of being a rabbi in the 21st century.
Yeah.
We're competing with a lot of great stuff. And even within the Jewish community, we're competing. Like, there are all sorts of really fun and great travel study seminars. So it's not like, oh, well, people would go with us. because they don't have to go with us. There are all sorts of ways that they can be doing their studying and learning and growing.
Yeah.
Which is really great, but it is harder.
Right.
And so in a certain way, again, I don't want to, this isn't about Western Mass. This is about conservative congregations, and I bet Reform as well. We have become synagogues that do life cycle really well. We're not necessarily about community, and we're not necessarily about holiday celebration. And actually, in our conversation, you just gave another example of it. Like, you came here for Kaddish, which is kind of a life cycle event.
Right, yeah.
And then you said, I want to pay back, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you're already in a different category because you came for life cycle, not besides bar mitzvah.
Right, yeah.
Okay? But lots and lots and lots of people don't bother. They come for holidays.
Mm-hmm.
Some, like there are those who come 3 times a year. There are those that come for Shabbat and holidays consistently. There are those who come for one life cycle. There are those who come for a bunch of life cycles. Like, there are just different points of connection.
Yeah.
But I am so clear that what we have here, you have in St. Louis, you have in Lansing, Michigan, you have in Chicago, just the numbers might be bigger or different because of the communities are bigger or different.
Right, yeah.
But the patterns, these are the patterns of the American Jewish community. And I really emphasize that because I think we have a tendency here in Springfield to apologize for ourselves. And I think we should stop looking as if the grass is greener on the other side. And I think we should feel good about who we are and what we do. Mm-hmm. In Chicago, they do not have a minyan that meets twice a day. Let's just say, when I was in Chicago and I was saying Kaddish, there was not an evening minyan anywhere.
Really?
Okay, in the whole of Chicago.
In all of Chicago?
There was not an
There
was not an egalitarian minyan.
Oh, wow.
Period. Mm-hmm. So, like, we are who we are.
Yeah.
There are certain things that we don't have, and there are certain things that we do. And I, as the leader of the community, want to push us to be really proud of what we do have, identify what we don't have, and seek to make it possible, but not imagine that the community is either going away or that it is a deficient community, because it's really not.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's deficient. I think we struggle.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, don't imagine that in Chicago everything's hunky-dory. Because even when I was in Chicago saying Kaddish, I went to a modern Orthodox shul. They didn't have 10 men.
Yeah.
I missed many a Kaddish because they didn't have a minyan, because for whatever reason people couldn't get to the service.
Yeah, right. So where do you go for spiritual advice? And from whom do you seek it?
So, first of all, I'm blessed with a really strong group of friends who really carry me and hold me. And, the last several years have been very hard, and they have just been really faithful and really attentive and really loving. And I have several mentors from the seminary who I lean on consistently and regularly. And I always, throughout my rabbinate, I have always engaged in some kind of professional program that had a spiritual component to it. So I did the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, and that was either 18-month or 24-month program with 4 retreats and study in between. I did something called Rabbis Without Borders. I did the Day School Leadership Training Institute, which was less spiritual, actually. It was a leadership program, but because it was a 3-year program that had summers in New York, there was something that was very satisfying spiritually about just picking myself up and going someplace else. I'm now just back from the Hartman Institute, which is a 3-year fellowship. I worked on the Siddur for the conservative movement. So in my 25 years as a rabbi, every 2-3 years I involve myself in a project that is 3 or 4 years in duration. And that sort of carries me until the next. So now I'm actually sitting here thinking, when Hartman ends next July, what's going to be my next?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to start it in August.
Right.
But I'm going to be keeping my eyes open, and maybe it'll be a chaplaincy program. Maybe it'll be something with JHSWM, the American Jewish World Service. I'm going to find a way to connect, where there will be a professional component, there will be a spiritual component. So in addition to my teachers and my friends, there's just a group that I'm engaged with in a meaningful kind of way. And those are the three big ways that I sort of nurture myself, and it's been helpful and a really important part of my work.
Yeah. So how do you define spirituality for yourself?
So sometimes it's about figuring out what I'm really feeling.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes it's about thinking about how I put God into what it is I'm feeling. Sometimes it's really about feeling connected. The rabbinate can be really isolating. And so, like just now, to spend a month with rabbis who are all struggling, each and every one of us are struggling with, how do we lead in these very difficult times as we navigate the relationship between the public sphere and the individual? That's spiritually satisfying and important for me to hear that my questions and my angst are shared with others. That's just an important part of what I'm doing.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
So do you or other rabbis feel that this is a more challenging time period?
Totally.
Others?
Completely.
Yeah? How so?
The political atmosphere in here and in Israel is really hard. And the tension between those on the right and those on the left in America is palpable. And in a certain way, American Jewish community has become a blue state and Israel has become a red state. And that becomes very difficult to manage those relationships. So to talk about Israel in 1967, easy peasy. To talk about Israel in 1973, easy peasy. It is just not easy peasy now.
Yeah. Right, because I think, from what I can tell, it seems to me that they're about the only country that likes Trump.
And I don't necessarily know, I wouldn't necessarily say that everybody likes him. I think the government may.
Yeah.
And others sort of look and say, what did you do? Right.
We're looking at saying, what did we do? Right. How do you engage the subject of Israel? Oh, well, that led right into this next question.
So I talk about Israel.
In your community, yeah.
I talk about Israel all the time. And I take a centrist position, which is, it is very easy, and I'm very comfortable talking about what Israel does wrong. And I am very easy and very comfortable talking about what Israel does right. And I am the metaphor that I learned at Hartman, although I knew it before, was a heart with many rooms. And
a heart with many what?
Rooms.
So
I will be very sensitive to the needs of the Palestinians, the pains of the Palestinians, the rights of the Palestinians. And I will be very sensitive to the need for a Jewish state. And so those on the right, I will push them not to imagine that Israel is perfect and to own that the narrative isn't what I was taught when I was a little girl in school. And to those on the left, I will push and say, really, and how do you want us to end the occupation? Like, what do you think it'll look like? Just saying end the occupation isn't actually enough, right? What does it mean? What does it look like? And so that's how I engage. And my real message is, these are really hard times. You don't get to walk away. In fact, you have to push yourself and say, lucky me that I've witnessed the miracle of the state of Israel. I'm not going to push away. I'm going to double down, and I'm going to embrace, and I'm going to try and let my voice be heard. That's...
Yeah.
If I were in a community that I couldn't talk about Israel, I would be in the wrong community.
Yeah.
And I feel really strongly about that.
So what do you think Israel is doing both right and wrong?
Listen, there's a lot that's going on in Israel in terms of the way in which the high-tech industry has just really flourished and blossomed. There is a way in which, when you think about what has been accomplished in 70 short years, it's staggering. I think that Arab rights and women's rights and pluralism are really under siege right now because of the way the government works. Netanyahu has given power to certain parties that I think it's problematic at best. So I'm proud of what's been accomplished, and I'm mindful that we have more work to do.
Yeah.
So the nation-state law that was just passed, it did fail to use the word democratic. That's a problem to me, right? I want the Jewish state to be democratic and Jewish.
Right. Yeah.
So So I applaud many of the accomplishments. I do,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not done.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I have trouble with why can't it be both a Jewish state and a democratic state?
It has to be.
Yeah.
It
I
has
agree
to
with
be.
you on that.
Right.
Yes,
No, it has
yes,
to be.
Yeah.
You can't, which is why one state isn't going to be a viable solution.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot that's being, and by the way, the fact that organizations like the New Israel Fund and Breaking the Silence and Combatants for Peace are able to flourish and do their work in Israel and Women of the Wall, that suggests that there's a democracy in place, because those organizations do not exist in Egypt, Jordan, Syria, right? They're not Iran. Those places don't. The neighborhood Israel's in doesn't allow for the democratic process and the minority views to be recognized and heard.
Yeah.
So I applaud Israel, and I think that they're doing something right there.
Right. Yeah.
But then I want to keep on pointing it out because I don't want them to stop.
Right. Right.
So.
Well, it's really interesting because my cousin who moved, he's from the United States, and he lived in London for a long time. Then he made Aliyah. Now he's back in London. But he said he used to listen to Al Jazeera a lot of times because he thought that was the most balanced in the news.
Yeah, that feels very strange to me to hear, because I read Haaretz, which is pretty critical of Israel.
Yeah.
So I would, but I would love to have a conversation with your cousin about that.
Oh, okay. I'll let him know. So, okay. What do you see as the most important legacies of Judaism, and how do you try to bring them out in your community, both among Jews and non-Jews?
So in this community, I have not really extended myself to the non-Jewish world.
Mm-hmm.
I did in Kansas City, but here I have really focused most of my efforts on the Jewish community.
Mm-hmm.
And here I noticed that I spend a lot of time talking about the individual and the self-improvement of the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we're talking about cultivating midot, whether we're talking about learning from the biblical characters,
Mm-hmm.
whether we're talking about taking particular approaches and trying to apply them to our daily life. So I think that Judaism offers a lot of wisdom to the individual.
Mm.
And for much of my time here, I think if I looked at my sermons and sort of categorized them, my sermons and my teaching, a whole lot of them might be about taking the midot
Mm-hmm.
and trying to integrate them into our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, and this is a change for me, I think I spent much less time pushing ritual because I felt like I'm not sure that that's what this community needs to hear. So I just wrote a piece for the High Holidays, a piece I really like a lot, about shoes and what shoes we wear and why they make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I used this very beautiful poem about shoes and praying. It was really beautiful. But I didn't actually opt to talk about why we wear gym shoes on Yom Kippur, because it actually felt like that would be encouraging the congregation to fill a square where you wear gym shoes, but wouldn't really be pushing people to think hard about, what do I want my year to look like next year?
Mm-hmm.
Do I want a year of comfort? Do I want to, and I was pushing for something deeper, less halachic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's in general my approach in my rabbinate has been to think about big universal ideas that have an expression in Judaism and help my congregants see why Judaism has a universal wisdom that it could apply to them. And I haven't talked as much about kashrut or Shabbat, or I've done a fair amount, not as much. And that's just been I think a pattern.
Yeah. So, do you think it's working? I mean, have people come back and said anything or given you any feedback about that? Or
you don't really know. It's hard to say because you don't really know when you're affecting someone's life.
Yeah.
or when you're inspiring them to think differently. If you're asking, do I think I've been an effective leader here? I do, but I'm humble enough to say there are a lot of things that go into touching someone's life.
Yeah.
And my teaching is just a small piece of that.
Yeah.
An important piece, but a small piece. So somebody who might be open to thinking more reflectively or incorporating some more into their life, who knows what else is going on that opens their heart to be available.
Yeah.
Like I'm humble enough that I won't take credit, and I also won't blame myself if, like, I'm a good teacher, and if people hear it and they don't, who knows what's going on in their life that they don't have it, the room for another big project.
Right. And that happens.
Yes, it does. That's called life.
All the time.
Yes.
All the time.
Yeah.
So I think this is the last question. What is the history of your community and congregation? How does that history shape the work you do in the community? Because you've only been here 10 years when you compare it to the history of...
I actually don't know the answer to that question. I mean, Bethel is one of the preeminent congregations in the community. You know, part of my challenge was to take its legacy and help make it relevant for the 21st century. That's what my goal was. And so, in all sorts of ways, both in terms of making the mergers feel successful to people, and also in helping the congregation sort of see itself within the context of a larger Jewish community. So,
yeah, well, I think that's part. How do you think the congregation does see themselves now in relation to the larger Jewish community?
I think they see themselves as a leader and a shaper. I mean, I think...
Who's a leader and a shaper?
I think that members of Bethel see themselves
as leaders and shapers.
I mean, and the truth is, in some ways we are, because we are the most open to reimagining what the community will look like. We are. Like, we're the most open to thinking about sharing space. We're the most open to thinking about, like, I think Bethel sees itself as willing to experiment and explore, and wishing and hoping that others in the community would want to do the same. And I think that the leadership in that regard is spot on.
Oh, okay.
So, for the community to remain strong, we're going to have to reorganize ourselves, and we're going to have to move away from focusing on a particular institution and focusing on a greater Jewish community here. That's just what's going to have to happen.
Yeah.
And I hope that the leadership of the synagogues, of the JCC, I hope the Federation of whoever, will be willing to ask hard questions and explore difficult answers.
What would be some of those hard questions?
Do we need these buildings? Do we need the clergy the way we're organized? What is the relationship of the JCC to the synagogues?
Yeah.
Those are all hard questions. And if the answer is, well, we've always done
it this way,
that's not a good answer.
Why do we always do it this way? We don't have to continue doing it this way?
Well, what worked then might not work for the future.
Yeah.
And I think that the Bethel leadership understands that those are important questions to ask. I think.
So what do you think might work for the future?
Listen, I have always thought that it would be nice if we could have a campus where 3 synagogues share one building. It's not clear to me that Bethel and Sinai, if Bethel and Sinai could reimagine their staffing needs to work together to support each other, I think it would be a good thing. Whether or not they'll be able to, I don't know, but it's certainly something to explore.
Yeah. Well, what about with B'nai Torah?
So that's harder because...
They're Orthodox.
It's not just that they're Orthodox. It's a little harder now because Rabbi Yaffe is fantastic. He really is an outstanding rabbi, clearly, but he's not modern Orthodox.
Right, yeah.
And so I actually see B'nai Torah and Yeshiva being able to work together more easily. And that may be the way things unfold. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the changing nature of the community.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, time will tell.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
How we're gonna organize ourselves.
Yeah. It'll be interesting.
Indeed.
Whatever happens.
Indeed.
So those are all the questions that were listed here that we were instructed to ask everybody that we interviewed. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
I think you covered it.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Totally my pleasure.
And pray that this recording worked correctly.